computer. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for agreeing to talk to me today. I really appreciate it. And I sort of just want to dive right into it. I saw an article about your study, and it says a newly discovered hormone that keeps bones of breastfeeding women strong could also help bone fractures heal and treat osteoporosis in the broader population. Researchers at UC San Francisco and UC Davis show that the hormone known as maternal brain hormone CCN3 increases bone density and strength. Can you tell me?
Yeah, well, that's sort of the, the hope that we could translate the finding. The study was done in mice, but we did test human skull stem cell when we added this maternal brain hormone like CCN3 in a dish. Then it did really seem to work quite effectively in promoting bone formation. So we hope
human bone
in human skeletal stem cells. So they used, fractures or different parts of the bone. When they did surgery, they removed a little bit of it. And then my colleagues sorted those bone cells and got the skeletal stem cells out. And then he tested CCN3. And so there it did work very robustly. And it seemed also like a very low concentration. And if you go to a higher concentration, it seems to be inhibitory. It seems to suppress the action of CCN3. So there we do have some limited human data, but it seems it works both in females and males. Even so, it comes up during female physiology, but when we overexpress it, either through viral induction in the liver, there we can see effects both in female and male mice. And also like in an aged mouse model and in a model where we remove the ovaries, where we sort of try to mimic menopause. And so there it really showed similar strong effects, but it's sort of dose dependent.
All right, so let's that research is amazing. Would you think that some human applications could be in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? What would be your prediction for human application for CCN3?
So probably, at least for pharmaceutical application, probably the timeline is usually around 10 years, they say, 5 to 10 years. I do think the hydrogel application, when you infuse CCN3 into a hydrogel, the effect, I don't think it would be as rigorous in terms of FDA approval. And so there I could see that could be available potentially sooner.
What's a hydrogel I put on my skin?
So a hydrogel, for instance, in the paper, they showed that when you had a fracture in a 24-month-old male mouse, and then you added this hydrogel, so it's like sort of a gel, and it's just infused with CCN3, so it's saturated with the recombinant protein of CCN3. And so when you put it around the fracture site, then it really builds a very nice callus, and the other mice, it's just no bone. So I can show you a picture.
That would require cutting the
Yeah, so for instance, like sometimes patients will have periodontitis or will get dental implants, and there's a lot of bone growth that needs to happen to sort of get that tooth really nicely implanted. And so there's sort of, dental application, or during, for instance, spinal surgery. So one of my colleagues at UCSF, and sometimes we have combined patients, so they have had a lot of vertebral fracture that needed sometimes, if it's really severe, sort of stabilization with hardware. And sometimes there's a problem that the hardware doesn't really get sort of implanted into the bone strongly, and sort of having that hydrogel that they could put around the screw just to make that implantation, faster and stronger would be really very advantageous. So currently they use, some spinal surgeons use recombinant BMP2 bone, it's bone morphogenic protein, I believe, too. And so they use that. So there would be sort of a potential application that could be pursued, I believe, faster. Yeah.
So tell me about your background for a second. You're an endocrinologist or an endocrinologist who's a researcher? What do you do more?
Both. So it's sort of a physician scientist track. So by training, I'm a physician. I don't have a PhD, but I did do some years of research before I originally did medical school in Switzerland, came to the US for research, And then I went back to medical training here in the US, so residency in internal medicine, and then fellowship here at UCSF. And UCSF has a research track. So during those 3 years of endocrinology fellowship training, usually it's 2 years, but here you can do it in 3 years. You get 2 years mostly protected for research. So that's when I started doing my research in Holly Ingraham's lab, and where we had this, amazing phenotype of very high bone mass. And my colleague had determined that it was a circulating factor, but they couldn't pinpoint which one it was. And then they sort of came in with the high fat diet experiment, which sort of allowed us to narrow down the candidate factors. And then we tested a few, and CCN3 was the one that was, showing that it was really remarkably able to form bone. And so,
And so, for example, if you had a lactating mother who
mhm,
suddenly got osteoporosis in her 20s,
mhm, mhm.
might be lacking CCN3, is that something that you
It possibly could. So we know usually half of the patient, they're sort of genetic susceptible of getting osteoporosis.
right?
And so like most of them undergo genetic testing. And then in the other half, we don't know. And so currently the current assays are not accurate for measuring CCN3 in circulation. So we had a really hard time showing that even the ones that we injected with CCN3 had higher levels. And we realized that the antibodies weren't specific for plasma. They're specific just measuring recombinant CCN3 in a dish. But as soon as you add plasma, it has a lot of other proteins in it, the antibody wasn't measuring it specifically anymore. And so, so we don't know yet. So I have collaborators who focus, like Adi Cohen at Columbia. She really wants to measure CCN3 and collaborate, but we're sort of either we want to make either our own antibodies, or now there's also called like nanobodies. They're very specific and they're very small, and it's quite reliable. So we hopefully can set up a meeting with one of our collaborators this week for doing that. And so that's one of the question. And we have another colleague, she's in South Korea, and she also presented some data for women with sort of, it's called pregnancy and lactation associated osteoporosis. And she was wondering, because in South Korea, they sort of, have a tradition for the first, believe it's 6 weeks, but maybe look it up on the internet, to keep women sort of secluded and give them a very high calorie diet. And so she was wondering if that, because, currently I'm doing an experiment in mice, feeding them high fat diet and see if CCN3 amounts are reduced,
Right.
just to sort of, if that could have an impact. And so we don't know yet, but that's definitely, questions
Right.
we should be asking. Yeah. That we don't have an
Well, by the way,
answer.
I called Dr. Cohen's office to see if I can
Uh-huh.
make only
Yeah.
one under 50. So whatever. Oh, I don't know why this is happening. Hold on. Sorry. Sorry.
Oh, she only would see you if you were under 50.
Yeah. Let me just put this on do not disturb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I think there are many at their center who are excellent in osteoporosis
yeah. So I'll check
management.
somebody
So
else out there. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
so actually, if you don't mind, let's go, because I'm writing this article for The
yeah.
Guardian
Hmm.
and I'm trying to make a decision about my own treatment. So
Yeah,
gotta just tell my daughter. Sorry.
yeah. No worries. Just let her know that you're. And I was just looking through the the
Oh,
information that you sent me. And
right.
so usually, severe osteoporosis, as soon as your T-score is less than 3, it's sort of considered severe. There's no real, absolute guideline, but usually like insurance companies will sort of adhere to that -3 is considered severe. And then usually you qualify automatically for bone building treatment.
Right. But
And
that's the question, which bone building treatment, all of them seem to have terrible side effects that
yeah, so
I,
all of them
that's why I was
do have.
excited about your study, because I thought I mean, so I've heard so many different opinions at this point. I spoke to a researcher who said that he believes HRT, just, estrogen
Mhm, Cumberland, mhm.
best line of defense at this point, and believes that Fosamax while it builds bone density, doesn't necessarily build bone resilience. And you can't test for that because you'd have to break a woman's bone.
Yeah, and we call it bone quality in the field, resilience, sort of similar. Yeah, so we can't really test. There's sort of one test that it's sort of starting. It's called trabecular bone score, where we're trying to look at the trabecular microarchitecture within this the vertebra, and that sort of gives us a hint about the bone quality. But it's not, as you say, we don't like, puncture the bone surface, or we don't like break the bone as we do in mice to sort of assess. And so what she proposed, the Fosamax and the Prolia are considered anti-resorptives. They're not considered bone builders.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's sort of the two big categories, the ones that sort of inhibit the bone-eating cells, the osteoclasts, and the other one that sort of build up bone. And there's two of them are PTH analogs. One of them is Forteo, has been on the market for the longest, and the cousin is Timlos. And those are daily injection, and I can show you the websites. The one thing it does, it actually sort of revs up bone formation, and at the same time, it also revs up bone resorption. So I often will use bone formation marker for my patients to sort of get a sense of the baseline.
Right.
But it revs it up on both ends. And so if you want to can you maybe that I can do screen sharing? I think it's disabled on your side.
How to do that again? Where do I do share? Not share my screen. Hold on. Oh, how do I do this again? Edit.
But I can just put it into the chat and you can open it and you can share it. So it's timlas.com. So if you want to just click on it, and then I can show you. And then I'll show you the newest that, it was sort of initially published in 2016, 2017, but now for the last 2 to 3 years, we have been using it more commonly. It's called, the brand name is Evenity, and the generic name is romosozumab. And I can then show you the results there.
Okay, so here's the
Timlos. And so if you sort of scroll down, you'll see a pen, and it's a PTH related peptide, and it's an analog, so it's slightly shorter form, but it's sort of a daily injection, and it's approved for up to like 2 years. But there's around like 20% of patients that don't respond to it, and we don't fully understand why they don't respond to it. And it builds up bone really readily at the spine, less so at the hip, but it's slightly superior to its cousin Forteo. And sort of the most common side effects, you can see sometimes you can have slight increase in blood calcium or urine calcium. So usually I get a 24 urinary calcium to sort of check what the baseline is. And then initially for the first hour or so is that some patients might get dizzy or have a faster heartbeat or feel lightheaded. And so initially I asked patients to take it at night, but my colleague who's running a study, Dr. Shovak, was, is sort of internationally known in the field of osteoporosis, now gives it during the day because she thinks there's some data out there that circadian rhythm really also plays into it, that maybe bone is more formed during the day and there's more bone resorption at night. So she sort of switched it to day use. So yeah. And so that's the sort of the daily injection. And I do think, based on your T-scores, you would actually qualify for it. That's my PI, Dr. Holly Ingram. She's the person who's writing that personal essay in The Guardian about osteoporosis treatment. And she wanted to know about, I mentioned it to you last week. Yeah. Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
All right. So if you were my doctor, which you're not, so let's just get that straight.
Yeah.
Doctor, but if you were my endocrinologist and you saw my spine, my, negative 3.2, and my hip is not so great either, what would you suggest?
So yeah, one of the bone building treatments, because initially if you were to go ahead and use either alendronate or Prolia first, you would sort of prevent of your bones to reacting to anabolic treatment thereafter. So your response would sort of be blunted. So ideally, it's better to start with an anabolic treatment. It means bone building treatment first. So either Tim loss, and then for the let me share the links for Evenity, so you
Yeah,
can
look at that too. Yeah.
so you can so there are two big studies, and they're women, were sort of disappointed because they did show a slight increased risk in one of the two big studies regarding a heart attack or stroke. So, but the risk is fairly small, and we can look at that risk difference
Right. Okay.
together.
So let
So
me
if
look at
you
that
want
one.
to,
I'll share the
and
screen.
then if you share,
Let me share the screen.
and that one is currently the most potent. It's a fully humanized monoclonal antibody against sclerostin. And so
Ros
if you,
Ramos, so how you even pronounce
yeah,
that?
so often we just shorten it to Romo, or you
Yeah.
can say
Roma.
romosozumab. So anything that's mab sort of defines that it's an antibody. So
Okay,
that's
that
against
that looks
sclerostin.
good too. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna check that out too. So those are the two that you would say. So basically Forteo or Roma.
Or yeah, and the brand name is Divinity. So if you check that here,
Vanity. Okay. Yeah.
and so if you scroll down a little further,
Yeah.
and then go to the first figure.
First figure.
Mm-hmm.
Results. Table
Yeah,
one.
no, this one we don't. That's just the patients that they enrolled around 2000, and so yeah, the figure two shows the fracture difference. And so if you click on it, so they're looking at vertebral and non-vertebral fractures, and so there's a clear.
Oh no, forget it. Okay, figure two. It's not letting me click it bigger.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Or
whatever.
maybe you just have to go manage settings, just accept there. Maybe then it will let you. Like underneath on when you share, you
Uh,
see this site uses cookies. So I think if you click on accept there,
Accept you. Duh. Okay.
and then now I
Okay.
think
There
you
we
can
go.
click. Yeah.
Thank you. Like you said,
Uh,
internet 101, right?
oh, no worries. And so you can just see that, and here they were comparing it against placebo. And in this trial, they didn't see an increased risk of heart attack or stroke. But in the one that they compared it to Fosamax, alendronate, they did see it. But you can see that, the risk goes down quite substantially from 1.8 to 0.5%, or from 2.5% to 0.6
Yeah.
after 2 years. And the Evenity is just a monthly injection under the skin that one takes for a year.
Monthly injection rather than a daily injection.
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know,
it's administered at an infusion center.
so you have to go once a month to an infusion center. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right. So let me ask.
But then if you look up, if you go back to
Sure, sure.
the link,
Let me
and
go
then if you go one further, I think it probably will be
share
figure
my screen
three.
again. Hold on. Let me share my screen again. Share. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So if you go one further, figure three. So if you either click on this little arrow on the right,
Article. Yep.
or you can go back to article, and then you can scroll down, and then
Yep.
you click here. So you can see even within the first 6 months, you already build up like 9.7%. So you probably will be close to then, hopefully osteopenia. And then even at the total hip, the gain is quite remarkable, like 6.8%. And the femoral neck is a little bit more variable, but most bone building happens in the first few months.
All right.
And
And
it's sort of a dual action. It sort of suppresses bone resorption while it sort of enhances bone formation.
all right. So let me ask sort of more specific questions about this. What if I do nothing? What happens if I do nothing? I'm 58 years old. I have these numbers. I'm trying to get a new DEXA scan by the same company or the same lab that did the first.
Manufacturer, yeah.
But again, this whole journey has taken so long because getting in to see someone or getting the DEXA scan has been it's a long period of time. So the next DEXA scan they had was in December. So I'm not even what I think I'm going to do for myself is I'm going to see the results of that next DEXA scan, which will be, a year and a half after I got the first one and went on vitamin D and got the PTH, the hyperparathyroidism diagnosis, which I brought down by taking the vitamin D, and then have been on HRT this whole time. I'm
Yeah.
really interested to see what the
Yeah,
number.
no, I definitely would get a baseline, another baseline first before even deciding if like anabolic treatment would be necessary. And a lot of my patients, I also sent them to physical therapy. So I can maybe show you a YouTube site of a physical therapist that's based in Canada.
Uh-huh.
Um, and because she is, let me just her name is Margaret Martin. And so I'll have patients work with physical therapy specifically for osteoporosis, really put together a sort of a strengths and balance and conditioning exercise program.
I have been since my diagnosis as well. I have been going on. There's a husband wife team called Juice and Toya that
Uh-huh.
do that do weightlifting, and I've been doing that religiously 3 times a week. So
Oh, perfect. That's really excellent.
I'm real. Let me go to your thing too, but I'm really curious to see what this. I'm going to this. Let me share.
Yeah.
Margaret Martin. The goal of
Wait,
my
hold on.
channel is to provide.
Let me share my screen with you again.
Yeah. But you could sort of, she has a section on balance, on posture, on strength training. I think at some point she was even a bodybuilder, so I think she sort of knows what she's talking about.
Oh, this is great.
Um,
Osteoporosis
and
exercise workout. Ooh, I love it.
yeah, and then at least here at UCSF, many of the physical therapists are sort of also specialized. So I think many of my patients do have a good experience. And when I at last year's meeting, I went to sort of a session. So we have sort of yearly sort of international conferences. ASBMR is American Bone and Mineral Society. It's coming up. It's going to be in Toronto. And so it's really strength training. Walking alone is good, but hasn't really proven to maybe give as much benefit. Anything that has a little bit of impact, jumping off a box, or that helps to sort of build resiliency or quality of bone. So that's helpful. And then in terms of nutrition, and I can show you sort of, let me just put
No, I'd
that
love to
link
know the
in there.
nutrition stuff too. That's really important as well.
Yeah. So we usually sort of will harp, on vitamin D and calcium, but that's really not, it's sort of the cornerstone, but there's probably many other micronutrients that are important. So it's just really sort of, in addition to ensuring enough protein, and we usually say, depending if are you like 65, 70 kilograms maybe, or?
I don't know kilograms, but I weigh 100, anywhere between 115 to 120, depending on the.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So maybe, 60 grams of protein a day, sort of distributed throughout the day.
This
And
is
then,
great. Yeah, this is really great. Let me share my screen again.
and
Hold on.
yeah. And so here, this is a foundation that is specialized in bone health and osteoporosis. So, they have a list of calcium-rich foods. It's not exhaustive, but it's ideally you'd want to take the 1200 milligrams that's recommended in form of foods if you can, but often, it's quite a tall order. So if you scroll further down, there's then like a table of calcium-rich food sources. It's a little further down.
Yeah. Sources of vitamin D deficiency, which
Yeah,
I was very deficient.
yeah.
I mean, but
And
also
so that, mhm.
it brings to mind a question that I have. Yeah, so this is all good. I'm looking at these foods. These are foods I eat. I eat these all the time. So, I'm doing all the right things. I know that for sure,
And then if you stay on this site and then go on Connect, like there's a few videos.
stay
You
on the
can
site.
either,
Hold on. Stay on the site. Okay, hold on. Let me connect back to you again. Where are you? Share screen. Okay, keep on going down.
yeah. So yeah, it's on the top. There's like a banner, and in the middle there is Connect. So if you click on that, further up, one up, yeah, there. If you connect, And then if you go find an osteoporosis related event on their
Oh,
online
interesting.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here you have lots of different upcoming events. And then if you scroll down further, there's events that are already recorded that you could just access. And there's about eating, moving, fall prevention, sort of
Brilliant.
mechanics. So that's quite helpful as a resource to sort of get a little deeper. And this person, Margaret Martin, that I put in there, she also has a few conversation with an endocrinologist on the East Coast that's well known in the field, where she talks about bone quality or bone remodeling. So that usually helps to sort of get a better understanding for patient what osteoporosis means. And I do think some patients, do quite well with hormone replacement therapy, and then, having the hyperpara, which does usually lead to more bone resorption because the body tries to maintain the calcium level very tightly. And so if there's not enough vitamin D or not enough calcium intake, the pTH level will go up. And so usually we do see a little bit of replenishment
When the
of
people again. Yeah.
mhm.
Okay, so instead of just speaking about me in general, let's speak about the menopausal woman in general. And so the the standard of care right now is DEXA scan at 65. I'm 58. I insisted on getting one at 56 or 57, I guess it was, or maybe I was 56. I don't know. Anyway, I
Yeah.
insisted on getting one um, because I had heard, I mean, I'm small boned. I had 3 kids. I've breastfed 3 kids. And I just thought, well, I could have it and I would like to know. And the more research I do into menopause, the more I think, why are we testing women at 65? Why aren't we letting them know this much earlier? So if
Mm-hmm.
you could rewrite these guidelines, what age would you say would be the correct age for a perimenopausal, menopausal woman with certain risk factors to get a DEXA scan?
Yeah, that's sort of a loaded question.
Yeah,
Usually
no, I know,
it's
I know. If you could wave a
usually
magic
it's
wand,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I do agree that prevention probably goes, really further. And there are some key or sort of, opinion leaders that are suggesting that patients should go maybe, like should possibly consider hormone replacement therapy at least sort of early in their 50s.
Yes.
And especially women, because we know once you go into menopause, perimenopause and then menopause, that transition leads to a significant
Oh yeah.
amount of bone loss, like up to 6 to like maybe 8%. And so being more thoughtful about that transition, I think one issue in the field overall is that there has not been as much research invested into women's health.
I mean, that's always the input
And
we get from everybody about every topic about women's bodies. There just hasn't been enough research. We don't know enough.
yeah, and DEXA is usually very low radiation. I think if there's risk factors such as being, family history of osteoporosis or being sort of, either on the thinner side, we know like usually a BMI of like around 23 protects you the most from fractures. If you're lower or if you're higher, then the fracture risk sort of goes up in epidemiological studies. So I do think that um, it could easily be done earlier, but then sort of choosing the women that might be at higher risk. But we know sort of after menopause, it's usually sort of there's the menopause, there's a rapid drop, and then once that sort of stabilizes, it's usually sort of in the 1% order. But I do agree, like you have been taking you made a lot of changes once you knew that you had these low.
Exactly. And I think what's missing from, let's say, an appointment at your GP, right, is, I mean, for me, I lost my uterus when I was 44. So somebody should
Mm,
have said to me, hey, by the way, you should be taking HRT. But back in the day, when I lost my uterus, we were still thinking that HRT caused blood clots and heart issues, and it's actually
yeah.
the exact opposite. The Women's Health Initiative had faulty data. Um,
And
So
they also removed the ovaries when you lost your uterus?
no, I did not have the ovaries removed.
Okay,
But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
there's
So,
still
but then you
stuff
still had some, but it's, yeah.
But immediately following the removal of the uterus, I started having migraines. Nobody explained to me that that could be hormone related. No, you know, he actually pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're going through menopause." Um, and I mean, to my mind, it seems more logical to give women DEXA scans, just like we say to everybody, get a colonoscopy at 45, right? Because we want to know if you have colon cancer. Why not tell every woman to get a DEXA scan at 50? That just seems like a much more logical age, since that's the age of perimenopause, menopause transition, you know, the average age.
Yeah. No, I sort of see where you're coming from, and I do think that yeah, I'm not even sure how that decision was made, that they decided to have that screenings so much later. And even for men, sometimes even have to fight for to get them screened at age 70, only when they had fractures, or then it's sort of an automatic reflex, but it's already sort of too late, because you would like to prevent fractures as much as possible, because that leads to increased morbidity and mortality, and it's quite significant. And I think that's sort of not well understood, how significant the morbidity can be and mortality
Yeah, I mean,
for an instance, a hip fracture.
I had a great aunt who got a hip fracture and died a few months later. I have an aunt, my mother's sister, who has osteoporosis. I mean, all these things point to a much earlier DEXA scan that I just insisted upon myself. But when you get patients, right? When you see patients, how are they coming to you? Are they getting DEXA scans earlier than 65? And if so, why and how? Why is a woman going to her GP and saying, I think I need a DEXA scan?
Yeah, some of them. So I usually I get the sort of complicated and severe cases of osteoporosis. And so, for instance, last week I saw women, and like if it's less than age 50, we call it low bone mass for age. We don't call it osteoporosis unless they fractured.
Right.
So if they fractured, we call it osteoporosis or clinical osteoporosis. And if it's still less than age 50, then we use a Z-score, and then we call it low bone mass. And I think for her, she got like a DEXA scan for body composition at a gym, was found to be really low. And then she got an official DEXA scan, and she was found to be in that low bone mass range. And she wants to get pregnant. She's worried about, having potential fractures. There's a case, I can maybe, let me see if I can see so one of my patients, she contacted a journalist at the Washington Post. I don't know if you saw the article. Let's see. And she was one of my patients, and she had severe pain. And then she went sort of from ER to, and it was sort of a medical mystery because it wasn't really known. And then one of the physiatrists, which was part of the spine center at UCSF, then contacted me, and then she became one of my patients. And so let me, that's the article.
Let me click on that for a second. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Got it. A new mother's felled by ferocious back pain. Interesting. All right. I'm going to read that.
Yeah. And she sort of had known already prior that she was maybe at risk, and she was counseled to maybe limit, the breastfeeding. I don't think she really breastfed for that long. But she's now also, because we know in half of the patients that it might be, genetic susceptibility for some of the patients.
Right. Okay.
But she went through, she did go through, through quite of a journey as well. And then for many of my other patients, they already had fractures or a long-standing history of osteoporosis. So I see them, later in the course. For instance, they already had forte, or they already consolidated. Usually after you have like a bone building medicine for either 1 year or 2 years, you have to go in with an anti-resorptive, like either like sort of a medicine similar to Fosamax or zoledronic acid, which is an infusion, also bisphosphonate, to sort of keep in the gains.
Right.
Because otherwise the body thinks, oh, there's really high bone mass. I don't think I need it. And we'll try to, you know,
Back,
eat
right?
it away. So you have to sort of stop that by giving an anti-resorptive. And yeah. And so like one of the cases I just saw last week was, oh, the patient was on Forteo for 2 years, consolidated, then there was the pandemic. And then her T-score decreased again from -3 to -3.9. And now it's the question,
Right.
oh, what is she going to do? She hasn't had any, new known fractures, but sometimes when you have a history of vertebral fracture, and so for you, even so T-score is quite low, they should actually screen to see either with an X-ray or with a vertebral fracture assessment if they can see any silent compression fracture. Sometimes it can just be, minimal, but it's good to know, because if once it's there, the risk of having more of those fractures, because it sort of talks about the bone quality, so the risk is then much higher potentially for you. And so I usually screen all my patients when they have T-scores that low
Go
for
get
the
a X-ray as well.
yeah,
Well,
either an X-ray or the DEXA also offers it's called a vertebral fracture assessment. So they can do
how
it
do you
when they
spell that?
do the
Vertebral?
vertebral fracture, or VFA, that's the abbreviation.
Oh,
And
vertebral
so
fracture assessment. Got it. Okay.
yeah, and they can do it at the same time as they do the DEXA. So when you do it in December, the doctor that ordered it, you can ask them to put in a VFA at the same time. It sort of can image it up to sort of mid-thoracic spine. It doesn't go up all the way, but usually most fractures occur sort of lower thoracic spine, upper lumbar spine. And so
So I
I
have a
think,
sister who's 6 years younger than me, who's an orthopedic surgeon, who's had 3 spine surgeries in her upper spine for various, I don't know exactly what, but she always thought it was because she was operating and so leaning over like that, but it could just be genetic osteoporosis as well.
it could be, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes they do it for degeneration, or they have slipped discs, or they feel they've sort of spondylolisthesis. They want sort of stabilize. So there's many different reasons why one might want to put hardware in it. But since you have a history of sort of severe osteoporosis, probably would be beneficial for her to get a DEXA as well, just to see where she stands. My mom has severe osteoporosis. She was diagnosed with celiac disease, but like recently, and I know my aunt, and so I'm planning on getting mine, in my 50s.
How old are you now?
I'm 45.
5. So you're going to plan on getting a DEXA scan at around 50 or so.
52, or yeah.
Yeah, something like that. All right. So that's an interesting, that's an interesting statistic there. Just the endocrinologist herself, what age she's choosing to get her DEXA
Yeah,
scan.
because I know I have a severe, it's like sort of a family history with severe osteoporosis. I breastfed extensively. The first one had lactation intolerance, so I wasn't able to eat any sort of milk products or
Oh, wow. Right.
cheese for a year. And so I'm not sure how well I did with, making sure I had all my calcium sources there. I was in my early 30s. So.
Is this why you got interested in endocrinology, because of your family history of osteoporosis, or
No, no. I was really interested in sort of brain physiology, neurology. So initially I was thinking about becoming a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. So I did work in neurosurgery for 1 year, and then I sort of focused on the pituitary. And then from there, I felt it was sort of a good transition into endocrinology. Yeah, that was sort of my pathway. And then here at UCSF, prior to doing residency, I joined a lab focused on sort of skeletal health and hyperparathyroidism and sort of sex differences.
and
so
the
that's
other
kind of
I did some research into hyperparathyroidism as well, and the statistics we have seem wrong because they're different in America than they are in Canada. For example, menopausal women. I spoke to an expert in hyperparathyroidism in LA at UCLA Medical Center, and he said that when you actually dig down into the statistics, because Canada keeps much better records because they have a single payer system.
Payer system.
So he was saying that he thought that there's 20% of women in menopause have hyperparathyroidism versus the 0.1% that we're saying here in the United States. So it doesn't make sense that Canadians and Americans have different percentages of, and his thought is that we're just not measuring for it. I mean, the only reason that I knew that I had hyperparathyroidism is that I went to see a rheumatologist after I got this diagnosis of osteoporosis, because I didn't even know who to see. I didn't know whether to see a rheumatologist, endocrinologist. I didn't know which expert to see, and happened to test my PTH. It's not a normal test that we give to women in their 50s.
Yeah, we usually, most commonly it's if the calcium is elevated, then PTH will get tested, but otherwise, but we do for a normal osteoporosis workup.
Yeah.
There it's commonly included, so there it's part of the workup. But I sort of probably could well be that a lot of patients are vitamin deficient or have low calcium
See, I had normal calcium.
diet intake. No, the calcium is kept normal. It's just the PTH will take it from the bones. It's sort of it's an extra resource.
Yeah.
So people won't know it when they get just regular blood work, but it could well be that many more, because vitamin D deficiency is quite prevalent, and so there's probably many patients that might have. And we often also see it when we use some of the bone builders, like the Evenity. I tested usually after 4 to 6 weeks, and I have had a few patients who have had elevated PTHs, but it's not part of the regular workup, but it seems like it just needs much more calcium influx during that bone building phase. And we don't even know how much, we just have that sort of generic recommendations, 1200, but I think during that extreme bone building, it probably needs more. But I don't know, as a clinician, I think that it hasn't been done. I haven't seen any data, and I was planning to ask some of my colleagues if they have observed the same trends in their patients or on this Evenity that maybe
they're having high PTH when they
because probably they have to come up with so much calcium to build the bone that the body's trying to somehow generate that amount of free calcium and get some from the bones, which you wouldn't want to. So, but we don't ask patients to take double amount during the initial few months, but that's what might need to be done, at least for some of the patients, I assume.
A double amount of the Evenity to make sure that they're
no double amount of the calcium.
Oh, sorry, yes.
To have enough to build up the bone, but we don't know. We only give the generic recommendation just to take 1200 daily, but it might need much more in some of my patients based on the PTH level. Yeah.
In terms of calcium, are what I have heard again from different people is to get calcium from food as much as possible rather than Whereas vitamin D, I mean, I live in New York, so I get as much sun as I can, but it's never going to be enough.
Not enough. Yeah.
So I take a vitamin D supplement every day.
Yeah.
I use or whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for if you need to supplement, I usually recommend calcium citrate. It does get a slightly more easily absorbed. And then if you can take it with meals still, and there's also calcium citrate powder if you don't like the pills, sometimes they're a little big to swallow. And so you can just stir it up in some water and then drink it throughout the day. Because it's shown it's better to take your nutritional calcium in, different portions throughout the day instead of taking one big portion, because then the gut is limited to maybe absorbing 500 milligrams of elemental calcium. And so.
Well, I'm trying to think if I have more specific questions. I might have more specific questions that I might email. I start writing, and then so we'll probably email you to fact check this. Done. But this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm just hoping that this maternal what is it called?
Brain hormone, CCN3.
CCN3 sounds like kind of a magic bullet for women. Like, I feel like you got to work a little faster because I'm getting older.
Yeah, there is a stealth company interested, and so hopefully they can sort of take it take it forward. There's still a lot of questions that need to be answered related to CCN3, but it does seem to be really effective within a very short amount of time. And it seems to be sort of, there's sort of physiological reason where it's sort of needed. And we don't know yet, after the mice were weaned, we don't know how long CCN3 might still hang around. And maybe the same in women too after weaning, and might help in that rebuilding process, because we do see a dip, but the dip is not as strong. Like if there's no CCN3, the dip will be much stronger. And so there's sort of the question, how much CCN3 maybe still hangs around and helps with that rebuilding process. And I think it seems like it doesn't need much. It just needs sort of a touch. And so, it would be really fast. Yeah, it would be wonderful.
Well, if you need humans for clinical trial, I
yeah, we have, because it, like when you go on, so if I can show you, if you go on Nature, and then there's like a metrics site, and so you can see all the different news articles that were published. So, here, so maybe you can then, it seems something went wrong, but I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat. Go ahead and
so any,
I'm gonna save this chat. Yeah. Okay, let me click on that, and I'll share my screen again. Hold on. Share screen.
I don't know if it will work on your side, but if you see it didn't work properly, but usually you can maybe try refreshing. Yeah, somehow it doesn't work, but here it shows you all the journal, all the newspaper articles and all the different venues it has been sort of
since the article came
promoted.
Okay, I will check that out. Go back.
And then based on that, we have people from France write to us, from Spain, from, throughout the world, depending on.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine that it sparked a lot, because I mean, the reason I'm contacting you after reading that is my options as a person at age 58 who was diagnosed with osteoporosis. My options seem to be not so great. I don't like any of the options that I have been given.
Yeah. And so let me maybe the one Evenity, let me just show you the risk factors there. So let me just show you the article. Let me just click on it, and then we can look at the adverse effects. So you can sort of see, because it has this black box warning, and it does sound scary for patients. But when you look at the data, then, it's similar to maybe the women health study, that they did see a signal, but it was sort of amplified. So sometimes that can be.
Okay, let me see.
So if you.
Let me press on that. Okay. Go to that. I'll share my screen. Hold on. Come back to you. Share. Oh yeah, that's the same thing from before, right?
It's a different. So there's two big studies. This one is a different one. This one is not against placebo. That was compared against Fosamax or Alendronate. And so if you go all the way down and then look at the table, the results were similar for how effective the medicines were. So if you go all the way down, that's just what they received. That's just a study design. And then if you go all the way down.
This one?
So no, this is table one. That's just patient characteristic. This one is just a fracture. You can then, if you're interested, look at this. And this one is just how much bone they built. But table two, further down. Yeah. So if you enlarge it a little bit, you can see the serious cardiovascular events. It's like the 5th line in that table.
Not letting me enlarge it, but let me put my glasses on so I can see.
Yeah, it's a little small.
Heart failure.
There's so it's like serious cardiovascular, it's a 1.9% versus 2.5% when you were on romosozumab. So it's a 0.6% difference. And then based on that, and the heart attack, it's cardiac ischemic event, it's 6 patients versus 16, and the percent is 0.3 plus 0.8. And so this difference made the FDA put on a label that it had an increased risk of cardiovascular events.
Right.
But it was only seen in one study, not in the other one. And it could also be that maybe Fosamax was, potentially protective. in
Right.
terms of cardiovascular events, and we don't know for sure, and the underlying sort of mechanism is not clearly understood. And so when patients opt to go on Evenity, I show them the data for both studies, and I show them the data for the other studies, and sort of see, show them, yes, there is an increased risk. The risk was small, but it was based on that one study, and
So,
it's sort of limited what we know why that was the case.
so if you were my doctor, you would say to me to go on Evenity, and that's the monthly infusion,
But
anabolic.
well, I think I would probably just first check where you are, because you did the hormone replacement therapy, you did, reverse your hyperparathyroid. Sounds like you're now vitamin D, you're doing strength training, you are very active. So all these factors might have really, benefited you a lot. And then if the trend is really positive, then I would probably continue just to monitor that. Like, let's say you gained by 3%, or if you stayed even, then maybe I would say it seems like, you didn't really gain much, and the likelihood will increase. And the older you are, the more aged your skeletal stem cells will become. And usually in younger patients, I do sometimes see a stronger response to Evenity, because their skeletal stem cells are still sort of younger. They can generate more bone.
Are you calling me young?
But yes, because the patients that were tested were like 75, 74. Yeah.
And actually, one last question, which is, what is the mechanism by which doing the jumping and the squats and the weight bearing exercises is building bone? How is that working? Do we know the mechanism, or is we just
Yeah, so there's sort of integrin receptor that do sit on the surface of the osteoblast, and they respond to gravity. So we do think it's probably, and they also, a colleague of mine in not in this lab, but in the former lab I was in, he was sort of doing tail suspension, like similar to like spending, astronauts up to space. When you have less gravity, they lose a lot of bone, a lot of muscle. And it seems like it was really integrin dependent. So yeah, so I think it is sort of, partly known that they can sort of sense gravity. And I think the osteocytes are also partly involved as well, because they sort of sense throughout the bone. They're almost like neurons, but they sit within the bone, and they have this very long sort of cellular processes that go out into the bone surface, and they also help decide how much. But a lot of the bone mass is actually decided from the brain, and there's not enough research being done yet, because we know like women who restrict their eating will often have very brittle bones and very fatty bones, and bones that break more often. Or women who decide to exercise very heavily, they will often also, because there's only so much energy to go around, and most of it is not it's not focused on your, bone or hair or sort of nails. It all goes into your brain and heart. That's the most important for survival. And so bone is sort of considered as sort of a luxury organ. And so you really have to nourish yourself exceedingly well to keep that,
So somebody
keep that.
who has a history of anorexia, or somebody who has a history of, what is the word for somebody who over exercises as a
Yeah, it's like we call it sort of a female triad. When they, they're female, they over exercise, and they often won't have regular periods anymore. But there's no sort of diagnosis label. But yeah, but someone who does. So I've had some triathlete athletes. So one of my patients down in Southern California, and she was training for maybe several hours a day and quite intense. And I did ask her to maybe cut it down to 1 hour a day, and she decided to go on Evenity. She did really well, but she was just, coming out of the pool, she would break her ribs.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, and then I know we only have a few minutes left, but I
Yeah,
look
it's fine.
Simone Biles, right? Who just did the Olympics, and she's doing these incredible twists and jumps and landing, and you think, how is she not breaking her bones? So, but somebody like that who is training 8 hours a day, but is doing the jumping exercises, she's not breaking her bones. So that's
Yeah, so that could be, but maybe at some point it could be, yeah.
But it speaks
I'm
to
not sure in her, but yeah, but she also is very muscle. So we also know there's a lot of crosstalk between muscle and bone. And so keeping the muscles really healthy will help support your sort
bones,
of
which I'm doing
musculoskeletal systems. Yeah. And so that's really, and you know, Simone Biles, she's like, you know, she's such a
so strong.
incredible, yeah, strong and versatile athlete. So I think she will hopefully not like, but there are athletes who are really, I think it's more like with the runners, when, you know, when they try to keep themselves lean and have a lot of impact, and that they will suffer from skeletal fragility. Yeah, I had a patient, she waited for years and went to like a Colorado Center for Skeletal Health, and she was delaying. And then I think recently she did get metatarsal fractures. And then I think that was finally the point where she felt like she needed to be, you know, there's like, she was trying to use vibration platforms, like many different ways to, and there we have sort of limited data. There's also, I think, some potential evidence that maybe even, you know, being on a small little trampoline, that's what sometimes astronauts do, just to sort of increase the gravity coming up and down can be helpful, but larger studies are usually not as reliable. But NASA is really interested in bone health as well because of,
I can imagine, right?
yeah,
Somebody,
because
when I said I was studying or looking into osteoporosis, somebody sent me some new contraption that you put around your waist and it shakes you. It's like the vibration, you know, vibrating the spine. Any thought on what that would?
yeah, I'm not really, I know some of my colleagues maybe at the VA are doing it for patients with osteopenia, but I haven't heard of the results yet, if that's any beneficial. And if it's just osteopenia, because I do think if you do whole body platform vibration, then it's the whole body that gets vibrated. It seems a belt is sort of localized, and you know, the bones are distributed throughout your body. So I don't know, maybe I probably would be biased and think maybe the platform might be more effective, but
just
I haven't.
Basically.
Yeah, or sometimes they have sort of vibration, you know, platforms that you stand on it, and sometimes at the gym. I think sometimes it's also for just relaxing the muscles. So
well,
it's,
thank you
yeah,
so much.
but hopefully you'll find someone that you like at Columbia. Yeah, there's other there's a lot of PTH experts at Columbia.
Yeah, I talked
there
to.
is
I went to a.
Silverberg.
I went to a.
Let's maybe look. We can just pull them up now, and then we can see. Yeah.
Dr. God, what was her name? McMurray or something like that. She was a surgeon. She was a parathyroid surgeon who was wonderful up there. And she actually said to me, "No, don't get surgery. You don't need it. You know, we can't see anything right now. Just because you have a high PTH doesn't mean you should have surgery."
Yeah. So let's see. I think Marcella Walker. So here, let me just. I think she might be a. Oh, let me just put the link in there. But I think Marcella Walker.
Okay.
Would be someone.
Let me look at
and she's also Columbia.
Okay, take that. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna do a cut and paste over here. I will try her. Okay.
Yeah, I think
Marcella Walker.
And yeah, she focuses on sort of post-menopause.
Okay, yeah, I'll try. The issue for me, and you know, like every American, is do they take my insurance, right? So it's
but if Adi Cohen, so hopefully she should be. Yeah, so hopefully that should be fine too. But yeah, I would definitely wait for your repeat DEXA, and then if you know, if there's a positive trend of a couple percent, then you could continue with what you're doing. And then, you know, initially we do say if it's less than 2.5, you know, patients should get treatment, but you did sort of get treatment with hormone replacement therapy and reversing the parathyroid hormone, and it can be really individualized. And so I often look at the trend. So the trend is really important within, and like endocrinologists or, you know, in general, physicians can get DEXAs, you know, usually it's every 2 years, but for clinical decision making, you can get it yearly.
Yeah, so mine would be a year and a half what I think I'm going to do.
Yeah.
All right. I don't want to take any more of your time. Thank you.
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
fine. Yeah. Okay, you're welcome. I'm glad. Hopefully, it will help some other,
And I know I'm going to
other
test it by
patients.
email after.
Once they,
Yeah.
once they read it, and I'm sure there's many patients in that same boat, and so if they can, connect to you, to your story, and then
Oh, absolutely. I'm
find
going
some of the information helpful, then.
to stop the recording.